Hello and welcome back to the Wise Up podcast, your weekly dose of business wisdom. I'm your host, Chris Albrecht, and this podcast is presented to you by OpenWater as always. And I am, well, let's just say it. I'll make the joke. Super psyched to talk with Dr. Adam Dorsay today. He is a psychologist. He has the host of the award-winning podcast SuperPsyched, where he interviews all kinds of people. He has a book coming out with the same name, the same title, SuperPsyched. He created the International Resiliency Program at Facebook, which he continues to do this day at DigitalOcean. I mean, there's so many bona fides. I can't even, we'd spend the entire podcast just listing your credentials. So I'll stop there and welcome you to the show, Dr. Adam Dorsay.
Oh, so great to be with you, Chris. Thanks.
Oh, thank you for being here. Tell us, so today we're going to talk a lot about sort of friendship in adulthood. And because it's an odd topic, I'm not going to lie. It's something that I've thought about a lot, and it ties into a lot of other things that are going on in the world in terms of things like a loneliness epidemic and all kinds of things. But before we begin, just give us a little bit of your background here, right? So you've got a lot going on. You've got the podcast, you've got the book. Just give us sort of the elevator pitch on Dr. Adam Dorsay.
Sure. Well, I love what I do. My nickname in high school was Enthusiasm, which is given to me in my garage band when I played bass. And I really chase just stuff that makes me feel alive. Even becoming a psychologist was the byproduct of that. I've been looking forward to, I just wanted to feel connected to myself and to others in the world. And everybody's talking about this idea called connection. That's what caused me to write a book on the 4 ways we humans connect. And I don't mean super psyched just to mean that you're happy all the time. It's meant to actually mean super connected to our psyches, becoming more well connected. When we're connected to what we're about, we become stronger. If you bench press your max and you say something that is not true about yourself, you can try this out.
Yeah.
90% of us will not be able to really bench our max. But if we say something that is true, and if we're authentically connected to ourselves, we're actually stronger. So it's a really big deal. We want to be connected to ourselves, to the world, to others, and of course, if interested, connected to the spirit. Spirit could even just be being where you are and being awestruck by the gorgeous beauty around you.
So, okay, so let's use that as sort of an on-ramp to our discussion today, right? Which is all about connection. And I think on a base level, the one thing people would associate that with is connecting with other people, right? Like the connections we form. And as you become an adult, connecting with adults just becomes different because you might have kids, you've got work, right? It's not the same as being in school with somebody all day long, being their neighbor and, going over to their house after school or whatever, right? So I don't know if there's a state of the state or a state of the union or something, but how do you sort of see the state of adult friendships? We'll relegate it to sort of the US right now, today.
We have fewer friends than ever. In the last 20 years, there has been a stark, sharp decline in friendships in adulthood. There's even a book called Bowling Alone. We used to bowl in communities. We used to go to community socials. Even picnics are on the decline. The way people get together. Ever since the smartphones came out, it seems very closely connected. We may have a ton of friends on Facebook, but are they real friends? Will they actually be your 3 a.m. friends who get you out of a jam? Are they your ride to die friends? They're not. And the idea of having a friend, most people in their adulthood have very few, if any at all. Many adults report having no friends. So let's take a guy who was born in Ohio, goes to school on the East Coast, gets his first job in Austin, Texas, then moves out to Silicon Valley. Each of those moves incurs connections and disconnections. And when this guy shows up in my office, I look at him and think to myself, he's a really cool person. And he tells me he has no friends.
Yeah.
And it's not shocking because he's moved so much and his priorities have changed. And even in Silicon Valley, where we live, it's like work is what it's all about. But who has time for friendship? Well, we need to make time for friendship.
There's been a lot of stories over the past, I'd say 5 years, right? Talking about specifically around men, right? And now I don't necessarily want to artificially limit this discussion, but do you think it's particularly more acute among men, this idea of loneliness and not having a friend or not having a real friend is what we'll call them?
Absolutely. It's even lionized. We have this idea in the United States of the rugged individualist, which, don't get me wrong, has some, positive attributes, but he generally dies alone and sad. If you watch the Clint Eastwood movies, but they're great. But think about The Unforgiven. People die alone and sad. They're not really connected. And what we need is to be vulnerable. Men don't like that because when we're seeking friendship in adulthood, there's a great movie called I Love You Man, where you see Jason Segel uh, become the friend of a guy, Paul Rudd, who has no friends. He realizes he's about to get married to Rashida Jones in the movie, and holy crap, she's got a whole bunch of bridesmaids, and he's got nobody. And this is true. This is reflected. And I hear these really friendable guys tell me, yeah, I got no real friends out here. I hear it from women as well, that they are longing for friendship. And friendships take time, but not as much time as we might think. They require also the possibility for us to be rejected. Like you may go out and see a ball game with a guy and the friend never calls again. And when we're rejected, it hurts like physical pain. The same parts of our brain become lit up in functional MRIs when we're rejected as they do around as when we have physical pain. Rejection hurts. And part of the deal is you show up and you don't know how it's going to go. It's kind of like a date, except without the romance. We call it a bromance, perhaps. But there's always that possibility that at some point you'll get rejected, and that's scary.
Do you think, is this a definitional thing? Right. So is it in the way that I am defining friend? So if I'm comparing it to when I was a kid, right, I
Mm-hmm.
can think about like, oh, I had my neighbor across the street and he and I were thick as thieves. And, but it was a lot. I had no other responsibilities. And, I'm 8. I don't have that many interests other than, playing with action figures or whatever. Right. Like it's really easy to do that. And also, I'm older. So at a time when there were fewer options, right? So you could watch 1 to 3 channels on the TV and that was about it. Right. But as you get older, your options are wider. You can choose, you are more mobile. You're not restricted to your walking radius. You can go wherever you want. So do we just need to redefine what a friend is in later stage instead of comparing it to sort of the anchor of what we imagined it as a kid?
So interesting that you bring that up. When you're 8 years old and you knock on your friend's door, at least that's how it was when I was growing up, although it's far less so today. All you needed to do was have some common denominator and you were friends officially. Baseball cards, you were into the same sports, the same games, whatever it was. We're friends because we have something in common. And more importantly, we have close proximity. And as you get older, we become more complex. And no one friend will probably fit all of our needs. We become more complex. We might be, yeah, into watching some type of sport, like my buddy to go to the Warriors game with. There might be somebody who is your kind of your intellectual buddy who you have a cup of coffee with and you talk about what you're reading and what you're learning. There might be another friend who helps you move. And if you can think of kind of the superhero catalog, no superhero does it all. Superman can fly, and Batman cannot fly, but Batman can do awesome things. Wonder Woman has hers. She's got the lasso. And friends are a lot like that. Our friends have superhero characteristics. They're good. The guy who you watched the Warriors game with, you might not want to have an intellectual discussion with that guy. He just might not do that. And when I use the term guy, I don't mean gender specific. It could
Sure.
be any gender. But each of these friends probably has superhuman, specific superhuman characteristics.
Yeah, I think about the friends that I have made over the years, and to your point, some of them are like, oh, I like hanging out with them, but I'm not going to talk about music with them because they just don't care about music, but they're
Exactly.
lovely in other ways. And so again, I'm wondering, just sort of like, is it am I creating so much pressure on myself to develop this sort of, to your point, all in one omni superhero friend when I should just think of it more as like, if I Voltron all these people together, then you would be able to have like one friend, but I should just appreciate what I have with each of these people on their own merits for what I get out of that relationship.
Exactly. We have to appreciate them for who they are and not, expect something that they cannot provide.
So I want to tell you, it seems kind of obvious to say this out loud, but what role did the pandemic and now remote work play in sort of this crisis in adult friendship?
For a lot of people, it made them more lonely and feel more isolated. The reaching out thing is really hard for us to do because of the rejection factor. Like, if I was to say, Chris, after this interview, I think you and I have a lot in common. We should definitely hang. That might be problematic. But I also noticed during the pandemic that there were some communities who reached out to old friends from high school. I know a group of high school students who live all over the country who are now meeting regularly every 2 weeks by Zoom.
Yeah.
And they recently converged over in Santa Cruz. And I was really touched by that. I think some people have been trying to engage in the virtual friendship for people who are not geographically ideal. And that's been good. But that's generally been the exception to the rule. I think that more people have become more and more isolated. Yeah, the incidence of depression went up, the loneliness in general as a society increased as well. And a lot of people got tired of meeting up on Zoom because it is not the way our brains are actually meant to meet. We're actually meant to be in close proximity. So much is lost through Zoom. But then again, if we leverage it, so much can also be gained through Zoom. But a lot of people are also so tired of seeing Zoom all day and then meeting up on Zoom as well because they've been sitting in these virtual work environments and we really do need people. The idea of people who need people are the luckiest people in the world. We all do actually need people. And it's lovely to connect with you this way. We're connecting through Zoom right now, Chris and and I see your face, and that's good. I feel a connection to you. That's great. And I could also say, for sure, it would be at least 10% better if we were to be able to meet in person. On the other hand, you are out in Washington State, and you have basically been able to meet with me at total with my in a very convenient manner. Just said,
Yes.
here's the link, let's meet. And so here you and I are hanging. So I would ask people, a work Zoom is not the same as a friend Zoom. You will actually feel at the end of the friend Zoom a little bit taller, a little bit happier on the end of the exchange. Is it initially going to require a little bit of activation energy to do it because you're a little bit like sullied on Zoom? Yes, I still recommend it. It's going to be a different after meeting experience.
That's interesting. And not to do log rolling here, but one of the things as we've sort of developed OpenWater is this. At first, we had one idea going into it, but as we talked with people, they're like, I work from home and I really just want to meet people. And so we've found people really want live events. They want to get together at cocktail parties and salons and supper clubs. And so we've been really sort of elevating that part because people are just yearning for it. I'm not saying anything that hasn't been discussed a million times elsewhere. So I'm curious. I don't want you to give away your book. You've got your book coming out. When does your book come out?
It comes out officially on October 1st.
Okay. I want to be cognizant that I don't give the whole thing away in an interview, right? I'm not going to ask you for that. But I do when someone comes to you, cool guy comes into your office and you're surprised that they don't have friends. Do you find do you have to be, I'm going to split this up. I've sort of taken the question in a different direction, but do you feel like you have to give friend advice as instead of psychological counsel, right? And the second part of that question is, what's the first thing you tell people to do in order to make that connection that you write about sort of in your book? So I'll start with the first part, sorry, which is do you become, how has your job changed to where you're like, hey, you should go join a sports league? Or do you know what I mean? How has that changed your job?
Not all that much. Essentially, the two are the same. Friend advice and psychological counsel are the same. What am I meant to do? I'm meant to help improve the person's mental health. That's a big part of my job. And if it's to have a greater social life, which we all know is probably going to be one of the biggest return on investments that we can get in terms of the entire portfolio of our mental health. We know we need to sleep well. We know we need good nutrition. We know we need to get adequate sunlight, a whole bunch of things that we need, but certainly social engagement would be a big thing. end of life studies indicate that it's the relationships that have mattered most. And we can't just lean on our spouse to give us everything, because our spouses are also human. They're not superheroes in every domain. My wife will not watch basketball with me. It's not happening. I need other people for that. And I don't take anything away from the awesomeness that is my wife. But as Esther Perel noted, we used to live in villages, and we could just basically knock on the door and say, hey, man, let's go grab a beer. To somebody else, you'd say, let's go hunting or fishing. To somebody else, you might say, let's go build a thing. We had villages. And now the entire village that we used to have is basically meant to be found in our spouse. And that's just not possible. So for better marriages, we'd be way better off having good friends so that we don't lean on our spouses for everything.
So, okay. So now to the second part of the question is,
Sure.
what's one thing you tell people do to sort of create that connection?
My first tip is do something you already like where people will be. Some people love hiking, so they join the Sierra Club. It's a very easy thing to do, because worst case scenario, even if you make no friends, you'll get a hike. And if you do make a friend, you already got somebody with whom you have a similar interest. Go do a thing that is already awesome to you. Find that community. Some people will go to Comic-Con. That might be a little bit harder to find a good friend, but at least you got to see your Comic-Con thing that you wanted to see. Uh, Go do that thing that you already like, where the likelihood of speaking with someone is higher. Join a bowling league, join a book club. There's so many ways of doing this. I've found that having a dog has been one of the best ways to meet people. After one of my dogs died, I just took account of the number of people my dog introduced me to. If you're open to it and you have a dog, meet your neighbors. They are far more likely to engage you if you have a dog, because that's an immediate conversation piece, and it reduces the ask. It takes away the barrier. If somebody's just walking around alone, you're far less likely to be engaged socially. But if you've got a dog, it's an easy uh, entry point.
Yeah, I think your Comic-Con point is interesting, because I remember when I first went to Comic-Con, it was actually there was a sense of community. I didn't know anybody there except some coworkers, but I felt like, oh, I'm in my place. These are my people. These are, and so even though I was walking along alone, I felt very much a part of something. Do you find that do you put people on like a friend plan, right? Which is, I want you to go out and meet X number of people, right? Can you regiment it like that? Or does it need to be something that's more organic? Or what's the push and pull between sort of prescription and just sort of freewheeling, for lack of a better term?
Well, the first thing I would do is engage the person and see, is this something they want?
Mm-hmm.
And they generally say, yes, it is. And I'm the most frequent responses, and I'm scared. It's like, I don't know how to friend at this age.
Yeah.
Like, there are very few books on it. There are some. My TEDx talk was meant to leverage that. And would I put them on a friend plan? Sure. If they want, I ask them if they want accountability. Some people do, some people don't. Some people find it to be, they're not yet ready enough. They're still kind of kicking tires and thinking about it. So levels of readiness are really a big deal. But if a person is truly ready and they want accountability, yes. I ask them, have you at least gone out? You're going to get a high five no matter what. You're going to get a high five if you go to, a Sierra Club and engage nobody. The fact that you went is already a win. And keep going, keep going. Talk to somebody. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. And sometimes it's friend potential, and sometimes it's not. But the fact that they're out there and doing something that they like where there are people around increases the likelihood. And I am a cheerleader for whatever agenda they have and wherever they are in the process of being ready.
So I want to ask you, I don't want this to turn into Chris gets free psychological counsel from Dr. Adam Dorsay because he's hosting a podcast, right? So I'm curious, you say like one of the things I feel like you said motivates or demotivates people is the idea of rejection.
Right.
And I wonder if that is so sublimated into I'll just relate a personal anecdote quickly, right? Which
Mhm.
is I'm up here on Bainbridge Island. It's the birthplace of pickleball. I used to play,
Oh,
I
wow.
dropped off, and I went back down to the courts to play again. And I felt like I couldn't like ask for a game. And maybe it was fear of rejection, but it didn't feel like it. But I just sat there, and I recognized I was hoping people would come to me, but they didn't. And so I felt really stupid. And so I left and didn't go back because I was just like, well, this avenue is closed off and it is sort of this impenetrable thing. I can recognize my own sort of foibles and faults in that scenario. But do you think so? I'm trying to get back to your bigger point, which is the fear of rejection. Do you think that drives a lot of people and they just may not recognize it as the fear of rejection? Or, you know what I mean? Like the energy you're going to put into something?
Let's think about that for a second. What happened when you were playing pickleball, which is also, by the way, a great way to develop friendships. Because what do you do after pickleball? You go grab a cup of coffee or a beer or whatever you do. You can laugh together, you play together. It's great that pickleball was invented. But in terms of cognitive biases, we have something called the negativity bias. You went to the pickleball court and you drew conclusions ostensibly to protect yourself. The conclusion was this is a closed place. This is a place where I get hurt. So you didn't go back. You
Yeah.
didn't take the chance. It's almost like being in seventh grade at your very first dance, asking somebody to dance with you, knowing that you might have the long walk of shame.
Yeah.
Except we're now grown-ups. It's still alive and well within us. I don't care how successful or how old you are. We still have that little 14-year-old inside ourselves that's like, oh my, or 13, I guess, for seventh grade, who's terrified to ask somebody to dance because of that. And it plays out in pickleball. It plays out everywhere. Do I even begin a conversation? One of the few places where, historically at least, we could actually meet somebody where we might or might not retain the friendship would be flying and sitting next to somebody. But now that we've got devices, even that has been somewhat reduced. But what you would want to do in the case of the pickleball is ask yourself a basic cost benefit analysis question. What might I gain by taking the risk? What
Yeah.
might I lose by not taking the risk? And what would you say to that?
I, uh, the idea that there are lots to gain, right? Like it's the idea of, not only exercise, but camaraderie, friendships, being out, activating that part of my brain, right? And if, if I don't do it, then here's what I know is that I'm already at this certain base level. And so I'm just back at that base level, right? Like if I don't go, then I'm still here and I'm still moving through, right? So I'm avoiding sort of a high and a low at the same time by just sort of, reaching that sort of stasis. Like, okay, I'm fine right now. I don't have to put any energy into this or risk, as you were saying, right? But then there's also no reward.
Absolutely. And so, what is the negativity bias meant to do? It's meant to protect us. And we should be thankful that it's there. There is real anxiety, like when a lion comes toward us. We don't want to just be like, hey, man, I'm just chill. You can't be like that. You have to actually be anxious in that moment and run. Otherwise, your bloodline is gone. Otherwise, your life is gone. And similarly, when you're at the pickleball court, that's actually how you feel. It feels like, oh my God, a lion's coming toward me. I'm going to protect myself and never put myself in that situation again, except for the fact that there is nothing to fear. The worst thing that happens is the person has no interest in you. And the conclusion you draw is what makes the difference. Do you conclude either A, that means I'm an unacceptable person, or B, that person wasn't interested in me, maybe the next person will be. If you have the latter approach, you're far more likely to make a friend. And similarly, there's a high attrition rate amongst sales reps in just about any area because the rejection when you sell is part of the deal. You're not going to be making sales unless you are willing to be rejected a lot.
Yeah. Okay. Now I want to dive into unresolved issues with my father. So clear the next 45 minutes. No, I'm kidding. Well, I think it's interesting. I want to, what you just said, right? Going through and sort of the negativity bias. Does it just require like it's easy to sort of go like, oh, they're rejecting me when it could be for whatever particular reason, right? That's what you just said. So are there steps you have that you put people on to sort of like, is it enough just to tell yourself, hey, you don't know what the thing is, right? Like, are there things, because I imagine a lot of people face this in a lot of different ways. What is something you tell people as they sort of grapple with that, especially as it relates to meeting new people?
I want to give them a user owner's, sorry, let's try that again, a user's manual to their own brains. And the fact that these cognitive biases exist and they will show up. And the explanation that they have after the event, it's called an explanatory style, is what matters. Okay, that person's not interested in me. Maybe they're actually intimidated by me. Maybe they have somebody else that they're going to be playing with later. Maybe they're new to the game and actually don't even know how to play and don't want to say it to you. We don't know, but it doesn't matter. And one of the things we need to do is just calm ourselves down and say, okay, try again. Fall down 9 times, get up 10. And if we can do that, that is the cost that we need to be able to bear on average as we're looking to make friends, is the willingness to just try again. And maybe even ask ourselves, were we asking in a manner that was, really inviting, or what did it seem, did I come off a little strong in the ask? Maybe just talk to the person first before you ask them to play pickleball. Did I just say, hey, you want to play? Or did I say, hey, it's great to be here. What an incredible day. This is like nice respite from the cold weather that we always get on the island. Yeah. This is an easy, you're not talking about weather. When you're having those small talk initial bids, you're finding out, is there a there? Is there something here?
Yeah.
And afterwards, you're like, hey, you want to play? And at which point, if he says no, he might say, oh man, I'm really new to the game. I've never played before. At which point you could say, hey, yeah, I'm still down to play. It's roughly the equivalent of dogs getting to know each other, which you've seen them do. We're just seeing, like, is there something here when we're engaging in those initial bids to converse? They're usually really superficial, but it's not about the topic that we're talking about. It's in the bigger talk that comes on later on. Like, you wouldn't want to just ask somebody a big question when you're first meeting them. Like,
Right.
yeah, what do you want from life before you die? That's something
What's your biggest regret?
Yeah, what's your biggest regret? Something like that. Those are great questions for later. And I think that they can deepen relationships if the other person is down to answer them. But a lot of people are not. But you do need to give an initial bid to see if there's a there.
Okay. So what I am getting from this, as we sort of wind down here on our chat, is sort of getting out of your own head, especially when it comes to sort of getting yourself out there, right? I only know what's going on inside my head. I don't know what's going on inside other people's heads. So let's give people like an actionable bit of advice, right? We've identified that there is sort of a crisis in friendships, an epidemic of loneliness. People, we through remote work and a pandemic, there are all sorts of things, right, that are sort of pressing down upon us, that are preventing us. So how do we break through? What's a bit of actionable advice that we can give people right now that they can do to start their journey on like getting back to creating friendships, and more of them in their lives?
Well, the first thing I would ask is, how much friendship do you want? Some people are kind of like canines. Like, I just want friends all the time. I want to be around friends. I want to be around Ross. I want to be around Rachel. I want to be around Phoebe. I want to be around them at, the daily perk. I want to be there all the time and every day. And there's some people who are a little bit less social and they have different needs. I'd like to meet with somebody like once every 2 weeks, once a month. And that's fine too. First thing I would do is I would ask them, what are you looking for? Are you looking for somebody to converse with? Are you looking for a hiking buddy? Are you looking for somebody to brew beer with? I don't know what it is. Is it activity-based friendship? Is it, just talking-based friendship that you're looking for? And what are you missing by not having it? Because oftentimes, because we have such an aversion to loss, sometimes that's a big motivator. And sometimes we can kind of geek out to the fact that, yeah, if I went through my life with as few friends as I have and the limited amount of contact that I have, what am I missing out on? So we want to leverage both systems of like, what will I get and what will I miss? And how ready am I And maybe some people are very, very shy and they're like, God, how do I even broker a conversation? I would start with the checkout person at Trader Joe's, for example, and just ask a simple question to the Trader Joe's person. Hey, what's a product here that you love that I might be missing out on? I know it's a regional place, so it could be any store. It could be Wegmans. It could be any grocery store. But you can often ask the person who's checking you out just to get you a little desensitized to talking to people. Hey, what's a product in this store that you love that I might have missed? You can talk to your bank teller, you can talk to people as kind of practice. In the worst case scenario, they'll get a nice conversation. They'll get a little lift from your positivity in the interaction, and you will become a little bit more ready to engage. And remember, it's scary. We could be a grown-ups and successful, and there is a little teenager right inside of us, or even younger, that is terrified to even begin the process. Most of us are built this way. It's okay. The ROI that we get from friendships is bigger than just about anything we could ever engage in. So, readiness and the willingness to look at what will I miss out on, what will I get if I have it, and what kind of friendships do I want? Really think about it. Even just write down what your intentions are. We often, it's kind of like a shopping list. It's useful to write these things down and to look at them and get really precise about what it is that we are looking for.
Yeah, there are two things that I love. One, just the tactical element of asking that question to the checkout person. Right now, your results, your mileage may vary, but it's not, you're limited by time because there's going to be somebody behind you, so you can't spend a lot of time talking. It's not going to devolve into awkwardness, and you might actually get a really good the midnight mood chocolate sauce or whatever. Right? Like that's something you get. I think that's really interesting, and I also think just what I think is really helpful and what you've talked about today, just to reinforce it, is that the idea of friendship, like you can get lots of things from lots of different people, and every friend doesn't have to be the person you call at 3 a.m. Right? There's just different levels. And I think that's really illuminating. So the other bit of actionable advice I would give people listening is to subscribe to the SuperPsyched podcast.
Oh, thanks.
Hosted by Dr. Adam Dorsay, my guest today. And when does your book come out again?
Comes out October 1st. I'm super excited for it to come out. I'm scared, of course, but I am really excited to see what happens.
Is it available for pre-order yet, or when does that happen?
It will be available for pre-order later this summer, so probably around August. And I will have hard copies at home, so if people hit me up, I would be able to at least engage the publisher to send a book their way.
Well, I will definitely hit you up for a book around that time, and hopefully we'll have you back on as a guest to talk more about your book now that when people will be able to go out and get it. We have been chatting today with Dr. Adam Dorsay, psychologist, host of the SuperPsyched podcast, author of the SuperPsyched book. Dr. Adam, thank you so much for your time today. This has been really wonderful.
Chris, I've loved hanging with you.
Maybe we can be friends.
Maybe we can.
All right. Thanks so much.